Namaste, Suswagatam friends across the globe to our Virat Hindustan Sangam program, Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga, which we have every Sunday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And we have another program today, the 148th episode. 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And we have another program today. The topic is India's national interest and situation in Ukraine. And we have with us, along with Dr. Subramanian Swamy, our guest, Abhijit Iyer, who will be discussing the situation, India's national interest and situation in Ukraine. Abhijit Iyer is a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, a defense economist. He is pursuing his PhD in his war studies from King's College, London. Has regular columns in numerous newspapers in India and abroad, and it is a great pleasure to have him with us discussing this topic with Dr. Swamy. Our last Sunday episode on the Hindutva under siege today is Hindutva under siege today. We had a viewership of over 79,000 viewers across the globe. I thank our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Swaminathan, Rakesh Gargi, Ishwar Iyer, Ajesh Nair, and Vishal Mehta, and my co-host, Mr. Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi from Delhi, and my other co-host, Ramesh Swamy is tied up somewhere else in deep south, so he'll not be able to join our program. So this opening remarks, it is over to Dr. Swamy to initiate today's discussion and let us know the reality of the situation in Ukraine and what is in India's national interest. Over to Dr. Swamy. The reality of the situation in Ukraine and what is in India's national interest. Over to Dr. Swamy. The reality of the situation in Ukraine and what is in India's national interest. Over to Dr. Swamy. The reality of the situation.
There is an echo, no?
Yeah, there's a big echo. Yeah, it's stopped now.
Okay. Thanks, Jagdish, for this very good, appropriate occasion, in considering what's happening in the world. We have with us someone who's now acknowledged as an expert. He doesn't have to flaunt his degrees or his publications, but he's widely known. He's not only appears on television, YouTubes and so on, but he also is a prolific writer. So welcome to Abhijit. I'm not sure whether we'll agree with you or not agree with you, because my last discussion with you, I thought I'm not on the same page. For instance, you had said that the Russians will take over the country and appoint a new president by Friday, but it's not happened. Something new. So you'll have to explain what was the variable that you didn't allow for, and this happened. But that doesn't mean that you are not. We don't hold you in very high esteem as a man of learning, as a man dedicated to the subject. So we all want to hear. Now, basically, I will begin by just a 5-minute introduction on the subject from my perspective. And then, as per your perspective, put it across, and then later on we will have exchange. The two elements of the topic that we announced, one is India's national interest and the other is situation in Ukraine. As far as our national interests are concerned, I will say, broadly speaking, India should work within 4 dimensions. One is that it must defend democracy. Otherwise, what is if you are with dictatorships and democracies, you can't make a distinction between the two. Then it's very bad for India's image. And I would certainly say, in this particular example, Ukraine was a flourishing democracy. They may have some upheavals. One president had to be driven away by a mob, but still they have elections. And today somebody is being elected who a young person who is now shown himself to be a man of great courage. And I think, therefore, it was our India should have been much more forthcoming. I'm not saying India must underwrite everything the democracy says. The United States is a democracy, but there are so many things they do we don't agree with, and they also don't agree with us. By democracy, of course, we have to disagree. But I would say that all we seem to be doing is evacuation. We did in Afghanistan. We did in Iraq. We are now doing it in Ukraine. So we don't seem to have our national interests worked into any kind of policy. It's just save save your people who have gone there on their own free will to study and to earn and to work and so on. So I think one of the things I would like to say is that it was in our national interest, in the name of democracy, to have supported, maybe lukewarm, but supported and voted with those who wanted to censure Russia in the United Nations Security Council. And we've got now another chance now with the UN General Assembly. And I hope we revise our stand and support in the Ukraine and for its freedom and its not being bullied by the Russians or anybody else. The second thing is we have to play a clear international role, India, because we are in Quad, which has America in it, and we are also in BRICS. Now, you can't be in both. I don't understand how we can be in both. And maybe Abhijit understands, and because he's got lots of friends in the government also. And so he could perhaps inform us how you can be both. And what is more important, which should we? I mean, if somebody says, no, we should be part of BRICS, not Quad, that's a point of view. I mean, I can respect it and I can argue. But we must be critical of the fact that our government doesn't seem have a clear dogma about national interests. And therefore, they are flopping everywhere. The Chinese have occupied our land, but we go and meet them. There was a BRICS meeting which we had in India. Of course, it was online, and but Modi appeared with Xi Jinping. Now, the third thing is we should not take a stand where we become isolated and an unpopular stand. Today, we are isolated. What happened in the Security Council? We abstained, and how many countries abstained? China, India, and UAE. UAE, of course, you can, whether they are abstain or side with you, it's a small country. But we are on the same side as China. That means China has shown more independence, considering its close proximity to Russia, than India. And India has agonized, and then it has taken a stand of not voting for either side. So I think put together, I would say that we don't have a national interest based foreign policy in our country today. It's who receives whom and how they smiled and how they went out to protocol, or you have a rally in which you say "Agle baar kisi ki baar" or something, whatever. And it's not a well-structured thing. And I would like Abhijit to tell me whether he views the Indian foreign policy today in the same way as an unstructured, ad hoc set of steps. Then you come into the situation in Ukraine. I hardly need say that a country has been invaded, and by a much stronger country. And the only argument that I have seen them give is that they're going to join in NATO, but they haven't joined. So, and the Americans have not taken any. The Americans are not saying Americans are wooing and these people, Ukraine, is hesitating. No, it's not that. Ukraine is very keen, but the Americans are not so far. Maybe now they will. But the fact is that can't be a reason. All talk about persecution of Russians, all rubbish. To call the president of Ukraine as a Nazi, as idiotic, because he's a Jew, and his father was in the fight against, in the clandestine fight against Hitler in Germany. So, I mean, how can you say all these things, without somebody doing the research and finding out? It's not saying you're not doing anything. Now, suddenly, the Russians sent word that they're ready to have talks. The Ukraine government in hiding. They said, no, we don't want to. Then Belarus tried to intervene. And now they are more or less agreed. I don't know whether they're going to go through with this, because there may be other nitty-gritties to be worked out. But at last, if it's the talks will take place, but supposing the talks fail, can Abhijit tell us what should be the scenario and what we should be on lookout for? So finally, all this that has happened, how does it weigh on India-US relations, and how India's China relations, how it's going to be developing in the near future? These are some of the things that we would like to know from you. And then afterwards, we will interact with you. The entire panel that we have will interact with you. Over to you, Abhijit.
Sorry. Thank you, Doctor. So let me start with this one by one. So first is the unstructured foreign policy. On this, I agree with you 100%. The problem has always been the extreme personalization of Indian foreign policy since Nehru's time, and it remains unchanged. So you had people like V.K. Krishna Menon who would keep mouthing off nasty abuses to the Americans, would literally go against the diktat of Nehru and voted for the Russian invasion, the Soviet invasion of Hungary in '56, even though he was instructed to oppose it. And Nehru would turn a blind eye because Krishna Menon was his favorite. You've had several episodes like this where policy has been unnecessarily personalized. 𝐈𝐍𝐃𝐈𝐿, for example, would just go around making nasty remarks about Britain when there was absolutely no need to. I mean, they hadn't said anything nasty about you. Why would you say anything nasty about them? Etc., etc. I mean, it's such a long litany. The second part of it, of course, is the way our foreign ministry is run. Excruciatingly understaffed. There is no through career training. Literally nothing. So you have a very low intake point, and the value addition to the service is next to negligible. So even the analysis that come out of it are extremely well, let's just say they're about the same quality as a JNU PhD. There are, of course, notable exceptions here or there, but those are simply the exceptions that prove the rule. And of course, our beloved Lord and Master, the Prime Minister, seems to love the foreign service over all others. So he's kind of waddling in a sea of mediocrity as his pool of advice goes. So there's nothing much we can do about that except to, see it as we call it. Now, that said, in terms of Ukraine, I would say democracy or no democracy, support to Ukraine should be measured in terms of have they supported us in the past. And I think if you go by Ukraine's voting record in the past and their record in general, it has been an extraordinarily abysmal one. Ukraine sold Pakistan lethal weapons like the 320 T-80U tanks. They've supplied them with all kinds of lethal machinery. Russia has also supplied Pakistan, but with non-lethal helicopters and jet engines. Ukraine was one of the first countries to denounce India after the 1998 nuclear tests. They have voted against us 2 or 3 times. They have been regularly signatories to several statements from the special representatives and things like that against India. And mind you, even as we're speaking today, this morning, the Ukrainian permanent representative at the UN issued a threat against Indian students, saying that, if you value the safety of your students, you should be voting for us. And within the last hour, we've been getting reports that Indian students were beaten by Ukrainian border police and forced back, and they're being used as hostages in some form or the other. So I don't think supporting Ukraine should be very high up on our priority list, number one. Second is the question of Ukraine's own record in terms of the sovereignty of other countries. We need to look at what the role they played in Syria, but much more specifically, the role they played in Iraq in the 2003 invasion, which they joined quite happily. And that was a completely illegal invasion, which violated every rule book. In fact, it's as illegal as, in fact, it's the same legal principle. Preventative war is illegal. Preemptive war is legal. George W. Bush dressed up prevention as preemption, and that's exactly what Putin has done with Ukraine. He's dressed up preventing them from joining NATO as preempting them from joining NATO, and he's literally taken something out of something that Ukraine itself had used to join aggression onto another country. So even in terms of Ukraine's own record with other countries, it's been less than stellar. Third, we need to be very clear that at least since 2014, Ukraine has been a less than perfect democracy, which is perfectly fine. No democracy is perfect. But since 2019, when Zelensky took over, he has systematically been putting his opponents in jail. He has been putting newspaper editors in jail. He has been putting on primary, secondary, and tertiary sanctions on anybody who opposes him. And effectively, what he is the fountainhead of a web of extraordinary corruption, which of a whole bunch of oligarchs, and it's not very different from the Pakistani Fauji Foundation mentality out here. Because what happens here with Zelensky is that all the business interests are concentrated to his cronies. He has constantly whittled away the power of the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, and centralized it to himself. He refuses to implement the agreements that his own government signed. They signed the Minsk agreement saying that one way out of what happened in Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk was to federalize the structure. His government is committed to it. And yet what he's been doing is removing powers, much like Modi, and centralizing it all into onto himself. And mind you, this was also in opposition to his election promises. If you look at the voting pattern of Ukraine, the east of the Dnieper, which has always been a Russian majority, has tended to vote for a pro-Russian candidate, while the west of the Dnieper has tended to vote for a Ukrainian nationalist. In this election, both banks voted overwhelmingly for Zelensky because he claimed that he was going to heal all these old wounds and he was going to enact federalism. His own election promises, which he's gone back on. Now, going back on election promises is not a sign of bad democracy. In fact, democracies are known for bad election promises, which people regularly go back on. But jailing opponents, jailing journalists, whittling away the powers of parliament is definitely a sign of turning away from a democracy. So these are all the different reasons why we absolutely should not be supporting Ukraine. Plus, of course, the fact that we depend much more on Russia than we ever will on Ukraine. Next, the part of the unstructured foreign policy, like you said, Doctor, the Quad and BRICS, why both? Thankfully, I'm happy to announce we're equally useless in both. We're equally useless in BRICS and we're equally useless in Quad. So Quad is, though they don't claim it's a military alliance, we all know it's a military alliance. The problem, of course, is the other three members, Australia, Japan, and America, their ships can talk to each other seamlessly. They don't even need voice commands. It's all done on computers. You know, it's like pack thinking, like Star Trek cyborgs. They what the Queen Bee thinks, all the others know exactly, and they know how to attack. It's like a wolf pack attack tactics. India does not have that systems compatibility. And, you know, in private for the last 10 years, I've been hearing constant complaints about how India refuses to standardize its equipment and, you know, make it intercompatible with the other equipment. So it's really something more of a, think of our Quad participation more as a Punjabi wedding. It's all about the show and the dhamaka and the bhangra and the barat and things like that than it is about any substance. Because, you know, a great wedding can't ensure, I mean, a great barat and a great band in a wedding can't ensure that the marriage itself is going to be successful. So it's like, you know, Punjabi wedding where too much is spent on the barat and not enough is spent on seeing that the bride and groom are compatible. BRICS is a talk shop. I think we've all seen that it's been a talk shop since day one. It's fantastic for the five leaders to come together and make pointless hot air statements. But there's also been a clear warning sign in BRICS that, you know, Russia comes with a position on the first day, and by the third day of every BRICS summit, it's completely mutated and become very similar to the Chinese statement. I think there you're beginning to see very clear divergences between China and Russia on the one hand, and India, Brazil, and South Africa on the other. But in any case, they're all completely incompatible, and they were this entire grouping, which was in my opinion, a very foolish grouping, was invented by some economist. He called it BRIC. And then, you know, everybody decided how wonderful, and they decided they needed African representation, so they added the S at the end and added South Africa to it. But like I said, one grouping is useless, and in the other, we are useless in the grouping. In both cases, essentially, India is useless in the grouping. This brings me to the next question you asked, Doctor, which is, you know, the isolation that India faces in terms of its decision at the UN Security Council, the legality of the invasion, the Nazi bit, and the future of talks. I don't think, from everything that I'm hearing, even from DC, because the United States came out and made a clear statement saying, look, we don't expect you to vote with us, but we do expect you to use whatever means, resources, and faculties you have with Putin to talk, intercede, and try to bring an end to this. And mind you, most of the people I talk to in Pentagon anyway have a very low opinion of India's diplomatic capabilities anyway. Those same people curiously come on TV every fortnight and say lovely things about India. Sadly, in private conversations, they say exactly the opposite things about India, that, you know, look, we value your diplomatic cooperation as much as we value, say, Mauritius or Seychelles, nothing more than that. So, you know, I mean, nobody really cares about the diplomatic stance of an ant. So that, unfortunately, is what's happening out there. There's a huge dichotomy between what Western think tankers see and what it seems to me that their governments see. Because I've also been talking to the French and the Germans, and they're like, we don't even care about what happened. And the Americans are like, look, it's fine. We understand. Now do something constructive. They don't like to create problems. They like solving problems. Unlike our bureaucrats and diplomats, since you know my mother very well, loves putting up obstacles and everything. Unlike the IAS, IFS combined, those guys, you know, they prefer solving mostly. They prefer solving things. As for the legality of the invasion, the problem with the legality of the invasion is, I personally believe it's completely illegal, and technically it is. The problem is that the precedent that the US itself has set in terms of blatantly illegal issues. Number one was the bombing of the Bosnian Serbs because of horrific human rights atrocities. And they said, after everything was sorted out, after the Srebrenica massacre, the bombing started, the Bosnian Serbs were bombed into submission. NATO said, look, you can't become a separate country. You can't join Serbia. You have to remain this conglomerated state, this federalist state. But then when the same thing happens in Kosovo, they go in without a UN resolution under the principle of humanitarian intervention, which is a legal principle, but it isn't an enacted legal principle by the UN. And even assume it is legal. Assume for a minute that it was perfectly legal, that the intervention was legal. Separating it from Serbia and violating Serbia's territorial integrity, I have seen no rule of humanitarian intervention that allowed that to happen. And yet they did it. They also recognized Kosovo, which is what Putin initially did with Donetsk and Lugansk. So, it's highly debatable. Next, of course, was the Iraq invasion, which we've already spoken about. Prevention dressed up as preemption. And the third, and to discuss the third, I have to discuss the slight history, which is that, the Russians now claim that they had verbal assurances, that Gorbachev got verbal assurances that NATO would not expand east. And every time they bring that up, the Americans say, where's the paper? Show us the paper where we ever said we will not expand east. Which brings us to the third point, which is Libya. The UN Security Council resolution on Libya was very clear. It said you will ensure a ceasefire. But that is not what America, France, and Britain did. They did not ensure a ceasefire. They ensured full-fledged regime change. And when the Russians asked them, hey, this is a resolution for ceasefire, not for regime change, they said, well, it was impractical, therefore we had to improvise. And anyway, we had a wink-wink, nudge-nudge agreement. So, your verbal assurances are not verbal assurances. My verbal assurances are cast iron guarantees. Clearly, that can't work. So they have a history of bad diplomatic bad faith. They have a history of violating international laws prolifically, systematically, repeatedly, decade after decade since the end of the Cold War. So even legally, there's a case of equivalence to be made here. As for Zelensky calling him a Nazi, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. He may be a Jew, but I would remind you there were 40 Jewish officers in the Finnish army that served directly under SS command, all of whom were awarded Iron Crosses. Now, they all refused it to a man, because ultimately they were like, I'm a Jew, you're a Nazi, you're killing my people, thank you, I don't want your reward. The problem is something very similar out here. Zelensky may be a Jew. His parents may have been executed by the SS. The problem is he heads a coalition which has extreme right-wing elements in it who support, celebrate Stepan Bandera as the head of the nation. Stepan Bandera was a Schutzstaffel, an SS Waffen executioner, who was used by the Nazis as a Jew hunter, so to say, and a Russian hunter, and he would go round them up for transportation to concentration camps or just engage in mass executions. Even more problematic than Stepan Bandera, because you can argue Stepan Bandera is just a symbol and it's some way of connecting it to the past. It's like Subhash Chandra Bose, for example. Subhash Chandra Bose did not commit war atrocities like Stepan Bandera did. Stepan Bandera got his own hands dirty. But there is a much more problematic issue of the Azov battalion. And the Azov battalion is basically this, it models itself on the SS. Its logo is a mangling of the SS logo. Somewhere between, depending on who you read, between 9, 10 to 13,000 people, militia, armed, violent militia, white supremacist, openly Nazi, who give the Nazi salute, who believe that the Germans did the right thing to the Russians, who were absorbed into the regular units of the Ukrainian military. So there is a very, very serious revival of Nazi movements glorifying Hitler and glorifying the Nazis west of Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, that's west of the Dnieper, which Zelensky has never condemned, which he has accepted as part and parcel of his coalition, and he has not only not condemned them, he's never acted against them. He has never tried to tamper them down. He has never even tried to tamper down any of the things they display, because it suits his narrative perfectly well. He uses them as and when required. So I would say that Zelensky may, by birth, be a Jew, but in private, he's in policy, in practice, he's more than happy to use any, including Nazi movements, to further his political career. On to the talks now. I think Zelensky really has not many options left. So yes, I do remember I predicted that by Friday, Russian troops will be in Kiev. Russian troops were in Kiev on Friday. They haven't managed to take Kiev yet. Yeah, because they are now bringing in the heavy troops. So far, all they brought in was the light armor. Now they're bringing in all the infantry and the heavy armor out there. Ukraine simply can't hold out. Is it going to be extremely bloody and nasty? Yes. But there is no way that these people can hold out. Also, this particular invasion has been much, much more rapid than Hitler's invasion of Ukraine under Operation Barbarossa. It's been much more rapid than the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's been, by all estimates, quite a spectacular success. Is the resistance strong? Yes. The issue always comes down to how does a country, you can be extremely valiant. The valiance and the bravery of the Ukrainian soldier is not in question. But definitely it's glorious futility. I think all heroes should be saluted. But in this case, it's I can only think that this resistance is going to get into possibly an insurgency phase after the Russian takeover, which is imminent. Even if it takes 3-4 months, this is now a situation from which Putin simply will not withdraw. If he does withdraw, it will be because of the peace talks happening right now, which is number one, for Ukraine to accept all the land seizures of Russia as legal and hand it over legally to Russia, not stake any claim to it. Two, to demilitarize and promise never to join NATO. I think the longer the talks go on, the more Putin's demands are going to keep getting maximalist. And I suspect it's going to get a lot nastier. One of the main reason that they've not been able to get into capture Kiev full time is because they're going out of their way to prevent civilian casualties. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are doing everything to maximize civilian casualties. If you remember, Shivaji, who knew exactly how Aurangzeb was, never subjected his population to the tortures and depredations of Aurangzeb. He fought a guerrilla warfare entirely from the countryside. Zelensky wants to use his people as human shields. He's basically waiting for them, waiting for the Russians in the cities, in the hope the Russians will come in and kill as many people as possible and score huge PR points. I think that's a particularly cynical man, and I think it's absolutely despicable using your own population as human shields. It's a different argument that you're desperate and you're willing to do anything, but this is these are the kind of tactics you expect from jihadis in Iraq, jihadis in Chechnya. You don't expect this from an army that doesn't care about its own people and wants to expose its own people to damage. I suspect the talks, maybe the first few rounds will fail, and the nastier it gets, possibly the greater chances of success. And finally, your last question, Dr. Swamy, on India-China relations. The problem with the sanctions right now is that it's pushed Russia irrevocably into Chinese orbit. And for us who are a continental power, we're not an offshore balancer, that's our nightmare come true. It's Russia so completely dependent on China today that we're looking at complete and total encirclement. China to the east, Russia and Russia's puppets to the north, Chinese puppet to our west, Chinese dependencies to our south and southeast, and in the ocean below us. For us, this may be good or bad for Russia. I don't care. I'm only concerned about what's good for India. But for us, it is a nightmare come true.
You're finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Before I ask my colleagues to give their points of view, I'm glad that you frankly and honestly put your point of view. But essentially, I don't want to discuss what is a true democracy, what is a fake democracy, and who's despicable, who's not despicable. We're going by the rule of law. There's the United Nations. There are certain, the United Nations as a charter. And so in that context, it's undeniable that the Russians have unilaterally entered what is a United Nations country, namely Ukraine, and are in the process of taking it over forcibly. Second, you see, on the point about Ukraine, not supporting India, I would like to point out to you that the United States sent the 7th Fleet when we were fighting the Bangladesh War. I mean, a task force of the 7th Fleet. And did we, after that, treat America like a pariah? On the contrary, within 2 years, Mrs. Gandhi was inviting Kissinger to come to India. So this is, I would rather go on the issues of principles right now. I mean, all your facts and all, I don't want to contest it just now. Because I'm not as knowledgeable as you, and neither, as my wife jokingly says, you never uttered a word about Ukraine all these years I've known you, and suddenly you're talking about on television about Ukraine. Where did you get all this expertise and interest? I'm not a scholar of Ukraine, but I am only on a simple point. Russia is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. By all accounts, perfect or imperfect, Ukraine is a democracy. And it is a recognized country, a legitimate country according to the United Nations. And the Russians have tried to, have entered and tried to take it over. Now, let me also say that many of the things that are said about, it's not an important point, but I need to put it in, about Ukraine doing with India, it condemned India's nuclear test. I have found no records of it. It doesn't matter even if they did, because the United States also condemned our nuclear test. So, but how a country has behaved with us, if we go by that, I don't think there's any country with which we can sympathize, because whenever we have taken an independent stand, some other country gets upset about it. And we were bhai with China, then we broke with them, then again we made up with them, and again now they've come. So it's I would rather go into this core question again after all my colleagues have asked you questions. Do you think that whatever may be these shortfalls of the leadership of Ukraine, Russia was justified? Because in effect, from the sum total of what I heard from you was that you appear to justify, or at least restrain us all from condemning Russia for what they have done. When in fact, in my opinion, we should condemn them, because they have taken law into their own hands. They are veto holding power in the UN Security Council. which is there for ensuring. And you talk about BRICS. BRICS Delhi statement. You please see what they have said, that no country should take the law into its own hands. Everything should be done by discussion or with reference to the United Nations. I have, I've written an op-ed for a newspaper. If it gets published, I'll send it to you, where I've given the paragraph and the page numbers of the the statement made by Putin, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, and that's the Delhi meeting, where it clearly condemns any country crossing anybody's boundary and trying to change the government there by force. So I'm only on that point, and I'm saying that India should have taken a strong stand that yes, we have lots of reservations about Ukraine, but this is a violation of the UN Charter. And therefore, we will vote with the Americans, who have got lots of minus points. I know about it. It's all known how Americans tailor their arguments according to their needs. But the fact is that all said and done, America is a democratic country. And I will say, I'll criticize the Americans, but I will say that my leaning will be to the Americans in any dispute, for the purpose that they're a democratic country and we can bring about leadership change through opinion change in such countries, as opposed to dictatorships in other countries. This is my broad point. But your scholarship, your deep research, everything has come out. I'm impressed with it, but I'm sorry you're on the other side. So I have to disagree with you. Okay, Jagdish and Arvind, what you have to, you please now say what you feel like.
Yeah,
So Arvind, let perhaps Abhijit respond to what Dr. Swamy's comment, so that it becomes much easier. Then we can have the discussion further.
Thank you. So, for me, the lesson on principles is from Cardinal Richelieu. When somebody asked him, "Sir, you're a man of God. Have you no principles?" He said, "Sir, I personally, I may have principles. When it comes to the state, I neither have shame nor principles." So, I being a great admirer of both Cardinals Richelieu and Mazarin, I tend to belong to that particular school of thought. Is it aggression? Unequivocally, undeniably, with absolutely no caveats, what Russia has done is outright, blatant, illegal aggression. Now, will I say that if I was the Indian UN permanent representative? Absolutely not. Because it's not just what Ukraine has done to us. It's also been our record in the past. When America invaded Iraq, we didn't condemn the Americans. We made the exact same statement that was made this morning in the UN Security Council. We urged talks. We urged, a return to the table, etc., etc. We are doing what a weak power should do. This is ultimately, we have to accept that what Thucydides wrote in the Melian Dialogues 2,500 years back is still applicable. The strong do what they must. The strong do what they do, and the weak must endure what they must. And weak countries like India should pretty much, stay in our aukat, so to say. So we've done, I think, the best that we could do. I think it's realistic. It may not be optimal. It may be completely. I'm the first person to admit that it is totally unprincipled. I'm a completely unprincipled chap myself, so I certainly shouldn't be preaching principles to other people. But I think it was the most realistic thing we could have done under the circumstances. As for rapprochement with Ukraine, I agree with you completely. Why that far back even? Saudi Arabia has done what not manner of wrong to us. And today we are completely buddy-buddy, chummy-chummy with Mohammed bin Salman. The point is, Mohammed bin Salman reached out to us and we kissed, hugged, and made up, proverbially. The Ukrainians have never done that. Therein lies the problem. Today, they suddenly realize there's a country called India, which is all kissy, touchy, feely with Putin. And they suddenly realize that they want our help. And they have taken hostile actions as of this very day. They have lathi-charged Indian students. They have held them hostage. And they made it quite clear to us that they're holding them hostage. I certainly don't think...
Just one interruption. I have not seen this anywhere. Is it in any of the newspapers today?
Yeah, it's been reported across all the news channels now in the last 2 hours or so.
Oh, the television.
The Ukraine. I've been talking to a lot of students in Ukraine because they reached out to me on Twitter. We've been trying to help them. You know, it's very uncoordinated. So we're trying to talk to the MEA, getting them to talk to these guys, providing them with numbers. The problem again is that, you know, there's so many students calling that those numbers aren't getting through, and then they're calling me and they're calling other people to. We've got a support group set up.
Anyway, let me do the research and get back to you privately.
Yeah. And so to answer very simply, was Russia justified? Absolutely not. Blatantly illegal, shameful. As a human being, I condemn it. As a policy analyst, I condemn it. But as a loyal subject of India, if I were ever in the unlikely situation to represent my country, I would be as obtuse and nebulous and ambiguous as our permanent representative for the UN was.
Well, you qualify then to be... Okay, go ahead. Just one thing, one short smart aleck remark from you. I mean, I like it. We voted for Hamas. Should the Israelis have broken with us?
So the Israelis, in private, they make a distinction between the operative resolutions and the non-operative resolutions. The non-operative resolutions, they say you do what you want. But the operative resolutions, which actually have consequences, they don't mind however many times you vote against them on words. But when there's actions involved, they're like, no. And we tend to follow that pattern. But personally,
that's what we should follow with Ukraine too.
Yes, but then
no value to us.
But extending the same... True, but extending the same principle, Israel is also sitting on occupied territory for the last 40, 50 years. So we should also technically be condemning the occupation.
That's a debatable question. We'll deal that separately in another discussion. Okay, Arvind and anybody else besides?
Yeah, Jagdish will join. He's there. I find that in these two conflicting views of Dr. Swamy and Abhijit on this issue, both of them are right. Dr. Swamy, in fact, Abhijit is also agreed with Dr. Swamy's assessment.
You should nominate Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi to become India's permanent representative to the UN. You see, he will do a very good job.
Yeah. Okay, Abhijit, you just now agreed with Dr. Swamy's view or assessment that Russia is an aggressor, and Russia has been a friend also. I also agree with you, Abhijit, 100% that Ukraine has never been our friend. Whether you talk about UNO, whether you talk about helping Pakistan with tanks or arms, or stand on Kashmir. Even on 370, what was Ukraine's stand? And suddenly, what you said in the last, that suddenly Ukraine has realized that India is there and help should be sought. This conflict between Ukraine and Russia was going on for months together. Never once had Ukraine approached India that you are such a big power, will you help us in resolving this dispute? Never. After Russia reached Kyiv and attacked these points, then only Ukraine has realized that India is there, and they're praising Modi to sky high, and that you can do it, only you can do it, and all that. And very interestingly, we have a Vishwaguru as Prime Minister. Vishwaguru is Narendra Modi ji, and Narendra Modi ji has taken that Vishwaguru stand. Vishwaguru means both the chelas are there for Russia is also a chela of Vishwaguru. Ukraine is also approaching Vishwaguru for a settlement or help, and therefore Vishwaguru has taken a neutral. Both of you should stop. Don't fight. So he has taken the stand of a schoolmaster when two children in the classroom are fighting, and he is stopping both of them. So I tend to agree for majority of the Indians. A neutral point. Of course, they say in Mahabharata also neutral stand was taken. Our Hindi poet Ramdhari Dinkar has said, "The samar shesh hai nahi paap ka bhagi keval vyad, और जो तटस्थ हैं समय लिखेगा उनका भी अपराध." This tatast, the neutral stand has never been appreciated. But Vishwaguru, if a Vishwaguru takes a neutral stand, we must appreciate. And putting the views of Dr. Swamy and Abhijit together, I think both of them are right. And if both of them are right, then Vishwaguru is also right. And since he has taken a neutral stand and he has spoken to Putin, yesterday he also spoke to the Ukraine.
But what he says, he spoke to. No, just one interruption. What he says, he spoke according to our government, is not what Putin has put out as what he spoke with the. Have we compared the two speeches? You must have seen
I think that's a failure of the diplomats on both sides.
No, but what you say,
Vishwaguru can never be wrong.
What?
Vishwaguru can never be wrong, and PMO can never be wrong. The diplomats on two sides. Diplomats on two sides, in fact, they have failed to come out with a uniform statement of the talks between the Indian Prime Minister and Putin. Okay. So I think I agree with Dr. Swamy. Everybody would agree that Russia is an aggressor. United Nations member, Ukraine has been attacked unilaterally, violating BRICS agreement and so many others. So therefore, Russia is an aggressor. And Ukraine has never been a friend, as Abhijit says. I 100% agree with him. And therefore, I support the stand taken by my Vishwaguru Prime Minister Narendra Modi of being neutral. Jagdish.
My question is to Abhijit and Dr. Swamy. There are a lot of students who are stranded in Ukraine, and we are all hearing about it. Everybody is concerned, and there are a lot of viewers watching our program to get some idea what is going to happen. So I want to know from Dr. Swamy, as a politician and as a senior statesman, and also from Abhijit, what you think will happen regarding the students' future in the next few days? There are some students who are coming, some from border areas, and as you just said, there were some attacks or lathi charge on students of Indian origin. So I want to know from you, because a lot of parents are concerned about the fate of their students who are returning. They want them safe back. So I want to know, I'll go into the other issues afterwards, my next question. But on the students issue, what you think could happen in the next few days? First with Abhijit and then Dr. Swamy.
Okay, just quick for response first to Dr. Chaturvedi. So Dr. Chaturvedi, you and Jagdish have known me as long as Dr. Swamy has known me, which is for the last 30 years. And I think you've both had lunch at my house where you've seen I have been arguing with Dr. Swamy for the last 30 years, disagreeing with him, because in those days I used to be a rabid communist. I was more to the left of Shaila Rashid and Umar Khalid, and I was to the left of Sitaram Yechury. In fact, Sitaram Yechury used to look like a capitalist pig compared to me. So, you know, in fact, I used to keep denouncing the CPIM and CPIA ML for revisionism and bourgeoisism and things like that, and I was the only repository of genuine communist thought, till Dr. Swamy kind of that's why he's my guru, because he allows these open purva pakshas to happen, where it's the argument that comes about, it's the argument that shines through. And he managed to de-brainwash me. My mom tried, she failed. Dr. Swamy finally succeeded, because she wasn't, as Dr. Swamy says, a Jewish mother, to deprogram me, decommunize me in that sense. But to answer your specific question, Jagdish, it's a bit difficult to say. The people who are being allowed to go across the border will be brought back from Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, depending on which border they are. I think right now all the aid efforts are being concentrated in Slovakia, where all the students are being evacuated into a connection point and then being taken out. I know for a fact, I've spoken to several of the embassy folks on the Slovak and Polish and Hungarian borders. They're saying that all the requirements for visa, vaccination, and things have been lifted by the authorities in those countries. They're being provided temporary entry permits. They're taken in buses straight to the airport and ferried back to India. What has happened since then, however, for the last 2-3 hours that we know of, is this lathi charge on Indian students that's happened at 2-3 different places, and on different countries' borders, but by Ukrainians. And they don't know what's happening. I think it's going to take at least about 8-9 hours for us to get some clarity on what exactly is happening, because all the students have been telling me the exact same thing. I initially saw it on Twitter, and then I checked my WhatsApp groups and things, and I'd had lots of missed calls, so I haven't spoken to them yet. But I'm getting lots of panicked calls from these people. I would really want to see what Ukraine does about it, because I think Ukraine holding Indian students hostage isn't going to go down very well for their PR at the moment. The PR is the only thing they have happening for them right now. Let's see. I think I'm hopeful that we can at least get some international pressure onto them to release those Indian students.
Let me just add to what Abhijit has said. In fact, the future of the Indian student is more questionable. See what happens if India's stand vis-a-vis Ukraine remains what it is today. That is not condemning Russia, not helping Ukraine. Then what is the fate of these 20,000 students, even if they are evacuated and come back to India when they go to complete their course? Because most of them are second year, third year students. When they go back, what will happen? How Ukraine is going to treat them, and how the universities are going to treat them. Because when India had actually issued an advisory about a month back that those students who want to come back feel safe, they should come back. None of them opted for coming back to India at that time. And in fact, they were demanding from the universities that the online classes should be arranged when they go back to India. Universities had refused to arrange online classes. That was the thing. So they said, no, you stay here. We will not have any online classes in India. That is now what will happen. Even after peace returns, what is going to happen to these students there?
No. Before Abhijit responds to it, Arvind, please try to understand the mentality of the parents and students.
Sure,
it is very easy for us to say that advisory was issued, but everybody was hopeful till the last moment. And students and their parents have invested a huge amount of money. We have to see all these factors. We say that just because there are a lot of Vishwaguru's bhakts spreading, that advisory was issued, they should have come back. This is not the way that Vishwaguru's bhakts should spread this type of messages. Our fellow citizens, students are in a crisis. Advisories may have been issued, but they want to come out from there now that the war has broken out. And it's also a question of these students could have, if they could have afforded the fees in India, they would have not gone to Ukraine. And this is the condition of numerous other countries around the world. So just an advisory or doing an online and offline thing is not an immediate solution. The safety of those students coming back to India is paramount, according to me. Definitely,
No,
there
but
are other
I'm
things
only
can be
I'm
reached
only
out.
supplementing your concern. I'm only supplementing your
Yeah,
concern.
thank you.
But it is not only concern for the parents today, but even tomorrow this concern will be even bigger. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm not denying
provided
the
you.
question.
Just
Yeah.
one request. If this is just a request. If everybody could please refrain from using A Vishwaguru, 2 Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and 3 Atmanirbhar Bharat, because I get uncontrollable fits of laughter every time somebody says that. So the next time I turn my camera off, it's because one of you have used that word and I'm laughing my head off. Thank you.
Okay.
I have another political or a diplomatic type of question. Now that we all say, yes, Russia has gone in, it was wrong, error, all that. But what I want to know is ultimately, if all these superpowers try to behave in this manner and there is a failure of the United Nations, forget a veto holding power invades a neighboring country, then what is the future of UN? And
Correct.
what is the future of the world order? Tomorrow, anything could happen to any other small country. How do we then decide what is fair and not fair? Then there is no meaning of the United Nations. I want Dr. Swamy and Abhijit to tell us, because if they have done aggression, they have invaded a small country, whatever may be the issue, a United Nation is there, veto powers are there. So what happens then to other countries? What example is the United Nations setting in the world order? Abhijit and then Dr. Swamy.
Well, the United Nations is setting the example it's always set, which is there's very little it can actually do. There's a reason most wars that happen outside of the UN mandate. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. But look, it was always invented as a check and balance. It's not perfect, but it's better than the worst, which is not having a UN at all. Unfortunately, this is the reality. I think if you have a change in the structure of the UN Security Council to be more representative of different points of view, that could be a solution to this. But till then, the UN really has. I think the UN's getting more and more irrelevant by the day, because it wasn't built for the information age. It was built for a much more innocent time.
Well, shall I intervene?
Yeah, Dr. Swamy.
First of all, the UN is not as hopeless as Abhijit has made out. The UN Security Council can be superseded by a General Assembly vote. And in that, I'm 100% certain that Russia will lose badly. Russia was going to lose anyway in Security Council also. And the veto saved it. Otherwise, only 3 people abstained. Russia was on one side, and of course, some of these pro-communist countries were also on them. There's a small number that voted for Russia. A huge, I think it's 4/5 of the Security Council membership voted against Russia. So anyway, the matter will get settled in the General Assembly, which will probably take another 2 weeks, 3 weeks. See, the second thing is, when I asked Abhijit, how do you explain Israel's reaction when India voted with Hamas? Not once, but they voted not Hamas, but they voted for that Palestinian whatever administrative body is there in Gaza in earlier occasions also. And he said, no, the Israelis have this operative and non-operative, whatever he said, there's a distinction on which they will react and there's a distinction on which they will not react. I say the same thing you should do with Ukraine. I mean, they criticize your atom bomb. All right, to hell with you. America also criticized us. They As far as beating up the students is concerned, I'll have to check up. I'll have the Ukraine ambassador telephoned and ask him whether this is so. You just tell me which media it has appeared so that I can refer it to him. But I would say, I don't know what the exact situation is. Just because you're an Indian student doesn't mean you don't have to obey law and order. I don't know what the real problem was. I mean, I'm not even hinting at it. I say that I will ask the Ukraine embassy about the facts. But the fact is, why don't you see how difficult you have made for people to live? Today, you privatized Air India, it is charging 1.5 lakhs or 1.6 lakhs for you to fly from there. And people are saying, how are you going to afford this? And then we have to pay another 1.6 lakhs to go back. So, where is the government of India's arrangement? I had said, if you remember, I said, I'm a private enterprise man, but I'm opposing the disinvestment in Air India because it serves a public purpose. It's always available. And if it was an Indian airline, we would have India government-owned airline. Today, we could have brought them all free. And so, therefore, I would say the fear for the students is genuine, and I agree with Jagdish. The parents, they don't want any fine logic, law points, and so on. They just want to know whether the children are going to be safe. So, what I think the issue is, I think we should, when we end this session, and we may have one more session after, say, maybe 10 days to see how wrong and Abhijit has been. Much more. Sorry, don't mind that jibe.
No. I have egg all over my face because I predicted about 5-6 days back that there will be absolutely no invasion, based on what all my friends in the Kremlin were telling me.
And then you said it will all be over in one day.
Yeah, well, not one day. It was about 2-3 days. But my face, I fully accept that my face is stained black with shame.
Okay. So, I would say India should make more friends. This is the time to make a friend. Now, if later on the Ukrainians are not grateful, well, I mean, we still have the same alternatives. In the event we take a stand today, we will get the reputation of being a truly independent country. Today, we are, there are all kinds of rumors floating around. That commission was paid in S-400. And there's therefore some delicacy on opposing Russia. I'm not saying that they're true, but I've heard it from very, very, very responsible people in the government that we can't go against the Russians. In Indira Gandhi's time, it was very, very clear. Do you know that Putin, when he came to India, when Sonia Gandhi went to Russia as a head of the whatever advisory council and all, she had a minister rank position in Manmohan Singh's government. She went to Russia. Putin personally escorted her to where? Vladimir. Putin's first name is also Vladimir. Vladimir is a town near St. Petersburg. There, Sonia Gandhi's father was kept as a prisoner of war because he was a soldier in Hitler's army. And Putin jokingly said, she and I come from the same school. What same school? How possible? Of course, he was KGB and maybe she's also KGB. I don't know. But the fact is that I think it's by no means a pro-communist country. It has elections. People have won and lost. There was a case where they had to drive somebody out because he was gerrymandering. But a democratic country misbehaving with us is not an issue in the larger interest of getting one more friend. It is possible that they will become friends because we are a friend in need, and we should take the necessary steps, forgetting all these things, even if they are true, to see that we are on the side of democracy, because it is a fight between dictatorship and democracy. Okay, then we had a long session.
Dr. Swamy, I have a
Yes.
question, just a small question. What about trade from India? I mean, trade between India and Russia and trade between India and Ukraine. India and Ukraine, we have trade of almost $3 billion, and with Russia, maybe about 4 times that, maybe $13 billion.
Well,
In
maybe.
this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the trade will also be affected, the imports will also be affected, exports will also be affected. So how do we look at this?
No, trade with Ukraine and trade with Russia, there's no clash. We are an independent country. We are still trading with China, by the way. It's the
In fact, it
largest.
has increased by 50% last 2 years.
If you have no shame there, why should you have shame here?
Arvind, you can wind up.
Yeah, we have really crossed that.
We have crossed about an hour and 70 minutes, in fact. Thank you, Abhijit. You, as Dr. Swamy has praised you in the very beginning, your outlook on international issues is so clear. Of course, today it was in conflict with Dr. Swamy, very strong conflict with Dr. Swamy. In fact, diagonally opposite.
It's not the first time.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In words of wisdom, Gyan Ganga program, we respect all the views. In fact, our attempt is to provide this platform for the viewers to know where do we stand and where do our interests stand. In fact, today we were discussing India's point of view in this Ukraine and Russia conflict. And both of you, Dr. Swamy and Abhijit Iyer Mitra, have provided a very, very clear vision, whatever you think. And of course, viewers will judge. Some of you agree, some other viewers may agree with Abhijit. In fact, when I was reading the comments, a large number of viewers had shown appreciation to what Abhijit has said. And Dr. Swamy has said in the beginning, which is the universal truth as of now, that Russia is an aggressor, come what may. And therefore, there's nothing wrong in my saying that both of you are right today. And thank you very much for sparing time. Thank you, Jagdish. Thanks the technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas, Swaminathan, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, and Ajesh Nair, without whose support this program would not have been possible. And as Jagdish said in the beginning, we have crossed 96,000 even for the last week's program. And this number keeps on growing because these videos are available on YouTube and several other platforms, which can be viewed later on. Thank you very much, viewers, for your support. We'll be meeting next Sunday again with a new topic, Dr. Subramanian Swamy and a new speaker. And this issue is not going to die down soon. Maybe we'll also have an update later on. So see you next Sunday, 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time in Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.